The silk scarf felt lighter than it should have. I knotted it at my throat while idling at the red light 3 blocks from Chloe's house, checking the mirror one more time. Grandmother's scarf, pale blue with hand-rolled edges, probably older than me. The rest of my outfit I'd assembled carefully. Cream cardigan from the Presbyterian thrift store, linen pants I'd hemmed myself, leather flats that had cost me $8 and 2 hours of polish work. I looked fine. Put together, even. The light turned green, and I told myself that again as I pulled forward. I looked fine. Chloe's dining room was a pastel dream, all soft pinks and buttery yellows, sunlight pouring through the bay windows like honey. The table could have been photographed for a magazine, china painted with delicate violets, crystal stemware catching the light, a centerpiece of white lilies and pussy willows arranged with the kind of casual perfection that actually costs money. Everyone was already seated. Derek at the head in a sweater that probably cost what I made in a week, dove gray cashmere that made his tan look expensive. Chloe beside him in cream silk, her hair blown out in those loose waves that only happen in salons. Even my niece Avery, 16 and bored, wore something pristine and new, tags probably snipped that morning. Marina, Chloe stood, arms wide, her smile bright and tight. You made it. Traffic wasn't bad. I set the bottle of wine I'd brought on the sideboard, nothing fancy but decent, and slid into the empty chair between Avery and Derek's twin brothers, Connor and Brett. Visiting from Boston, Chloe had mentioned. They nodded at me, matching polo shirts, matching smirks. Derek reached for the mimosa pitcher, filling his glass to the brim. Love the look, Marina. Very thrift store chic. He laughed into the rim of his glass, bubbles fizzing against his teeth. Chloe picked up her fork, not quite meeting my eyes. Derek, be nice. Then, softer, like she was helping. Though, Mar, you know you don't have to shop like you're still in college. You're 32. 32 and fabulous, Avery said. Phone already up, camera pointed vaguely in my direction. She panned across the table, lingering on my cardigan, my scarf. Vintage energy, she whispered to her screen, and the way she said it, kind on the surface, something else underneath, made my chest tighten. Connor leaned back in his chair, squinting at me. That cardigan looks exactly like something our mom donated in, like, 2015. Brett snorted. Dude, yes, the beige one with the shell buttons. Probably the same one, Connor said, and the table erupted in laughter. Light, easy, the kind that doesn't mean harm, but lands anyway. I gripped my fork, the tines pressing small half-moons into my palm. Said nothing. Just smiled, the way you do when you're the joke and everyone's waiting to see if you'll take it well. Chloe stood again, moving to the sideboard where a stack of cream-colored gift bags waited, ribbons trailing like silk waterfalls. So, before we eat, I have a little something for everyone. She distributed the bags with the flourish of someone who loves the theater of generosity. Easter gifts, because I saw these and just had to. Derek pulled out a leather wallet, Italian by the look of it, and whistled low. The twins got matching scarves, lightweight wool, the kind you wear in spring when you want people to know you vacation in Europe. Avery squealed over a small handbag, caramel-colored and buttery soft. Chloe turned to me last, empty-handed, her head tilting just slightly. Marina, honey, if you need anything, just say so. I know things have been tight. The word tight hung there, polite and poison-sweet. The way she said it made charity sound like pity, like I was a cause she hadn't gotten around to sponsoring yet. I'm good. My voice came out steady. But thank you. You sure? Because I have extra everything I'm sure. The room went quiet for half a breath, then Derek cleared his throat and raised his glass. To family, he said, and everyone drank. I took a sip of my mimosa, the bubbles sharp on my tongue, and looked around the table. Every person here wore something brand new, something expensive, something that announced they belonged to a certain tier of life. And here I sat, in my grandmother's scarf and my thrifted cardigan, the odd note in an otherwise harmonious chord. It wasn't the first time I'd felt this way at Chloe's table, but something about today felt different. Sharper. Like I was finally seeing clearly what had been blurred for years. The quiche arrived on delicate china plates, steam rising in fragrant curls. Chloe served everyone herself, cutting perfect wedges, adding garnishes of fresh herbs she'd probably grown in her kitchen garden. She set my plate down with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and I thanked her quietly. So, Marina, Brett said, stabbing at his quiche with more enthusiasm than technique. Chloe mentioned you're doing freelance writing. Copywriting, yeah. That's cool. Like for websites and stuff? Mostly. Some marketing content, email campaigns, whatever people need. Connor exchanged a glance with his brother. Must be nice to make your own hours. There it was again. That tone. Like flexibility was code for not quite making it, for not having a real job with benefits and vacation days, and a 401k that got matched. It has its perks, I said evenly. I bet. Derek set down his fork, leaning back in that way men do when they're about to give advice nobody asked for. You ever think about going corporate? I mean, with your skills, you could probably land something stable. We're always looking for content people at the firm. Chloe brightened. Oh, that's a great idea. Derek, you should connect Marina with HR. I'm happy with what I'm doing, I said, keeping my voice light, pleasant. But I appreciate the thought. Just seems like you could use the security, Derek pressed. Especially with, everything. Everything. He meant Paul. He meant the breakup 2 years ago that everyone still treated like an open wound, like I hadn't already stitched myself back together and kept going. Like I was still that woman who'd cried on Chloe's couch for 3 weeks straight, who'd needed her sister to co-sign her lease because her credit was tanked and her savings were gone. I'm secure, I said, and took another bite of quiche. Avery's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, then at me, then quickly away. I caught the flash of a notification, something from Instagram, a comment thread, probably about the video she'd just posted. My stomach turned over, but I kept chewing, kept my face neutral. The conversation moved on. Stocks, vacation plans, someone's kitchen renovation that was running over budget but would be so worth it. I nodded at the right moments, made small sounds of agreement, and felt myself shrinking smaller and smaller until I was barely there at all. Just a body in a chair, going through motions, holding space I wasn't sure I'd been invited to fill. When Chloe stood to clear plates, I stood with her. Let me help. Oh, you don't have to. I want to. We carried dishes to the kitchen, a gleaming space of white marble and stainless steel that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. Chloe scraped plates into the trash with practiced efficiency, loading the dishwasher in a way that suggested she'd taken a course on optimal dish arrangement. You seem quiet today, she said, not looking at me. Just tired. You work too hard. She rinsed a serving platter under the faucet, water splashing against the porcelain. If you took Derek up on that job offer, you'd have better hours. Healthcare. You could finally stop worrying about money. I set down the stack of plates I was holding, carefully so they wouldn't clatter. I'm not worrying about money. Marina. She turned off the water, faced me. Her expression was soft, concerned, the same one she'd worn when we were kids and I'd fallen off my bike. It's okay to need help. It's okay to admit things are hard. Things aren't hard. Then why are you still shopping at thrift stores? Why are you wearing Grandma's old scarves and pants you hemmed yourself when you could just buy new things? The question sat between us, genuine in her mind, insulting in mine, because she really didn't understand. Couldn't fathom that maybe I liked the hunt, the history, the stories woven into fabric someone else had loved first. That maybe my choices weren't about deprivation, but about intention. Because I want to, I said simply. She sighed, the kind of sigh that said she was trying so hard to be patient. Okay, but if that changes, you know where I am. I nodded, picked up more dishes, and we finished clearing in silence. Back at the table, dessert appeared. Individual lemon tarts with torched meringue, each one a tiny sculpture of sugar and citrus. Chloe served them with the same careful ceremony, and everyone oohed and awed appropriately. I ate mine slowly, tasting nothing, watching the light play across the crystal glasses and wondering when exactly I'd become the charity case at my own sister's table. Avery's phone buzzed again, then again. She giggled, showed something to Connor, who laughed and nudged Brett. They were looking at me, I realized. Not directly, but in that way people do when they're trying not to be obvious. Whatever she'd posted had gotten traction, and I was the punchline. I excused myself before coffee, mumbling something about the restroom. Chloe's powder room was done in soft grays, all marble and monogrammed hand towels that no one was supposed to actually use. I locked the door and stood in front of the mirror, staring at my grandmother's scarf. She'd given it to me the summer before she died, pressed it into my hands with her papery fingers and said, "Cloth holds memory, sweet girl. Don't forget." I'd worn it today because I thought it would make me feel rooted, tethered to something that mattered. Instead, I just looked small, out of place, like I'd wandered into the wrong life and everyone was too polite to tell me to leave. I ran cold water over my wrists, counted to 10, and went back to the table. Coffee came in delicate cups, served with tiny silver spoons and cubes of raw sugar that probably came from some artisanal farm in Costa Rica. I stirred mine mechanically, listening to Derek talk about a property he was eyeing in Napa, how the market was shifting, but smart investors knew when to jump. Connor asked thoughtful questions. Brett nodded along. Chloe beamed at her husband with the pride of someone whose life had turned out exactly as planned. And I sat there, holding my coffee cup, feeling the weight of every secondhand choice I'd ever made pressing down on my shoulders. Finally, mercifully, brunch wound down. People stood, stretched, gathered their gift bags and phones. Chloe walked everyone to the door, dispensing hugs and promises to do this again soon. When she got to me, she held on a little longer than necessary. "Love you, Mar. Call me this week." "Sure." "And think about what Derek said, about the job." "I will." I hugged Avery, who barely looked up from her phone, shook hands with the twins, thanked Derek for having me. Then I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a moment with the engine off, windows up, in the thick silence of my own space. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, saw a notification from Instagram. Avery had tagged me in a story. I opened it before I could stop myself. The video was exactly what I'd feared. A slow pan of the Easter table, everyone in their new clothes looking magazine perfect, and then a zoom on me. The caption read, "When your aunt shows up in full vintage realness. Thrift, flip, family brunch, Shah's Easter vibes." The comments were already rolling in, laughing, emojis. "Oh, gee, dead?" "I can't." One person wrote, "Is she poor or is this a statement?" I closed the app, set my phone in the cup holder, and started the car. Sure. Family bonding at its finest. My apartment smelled like lavender and old books, the kind of scent that clings to secondhand things and never quite leaves. I kicked off my shoes and stood in the doorway of my bedroom, staring at the open closet. Every piece in there had a story. The navy blazer I'd found at an estate sale, tailored to fit for $30. The sundress I'd mended after someone's dog tore the hem, now one of my favorites. The leather jacket that had taken me 3 months to save for, vintage 1980s, butter soft and perfect. I used to think the stories made them valuable, proof that I was careful, intentional, that I didn't waste. Now I wasn't sure what they proved. I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing the cardigan, and pulled my phone from my pocket. One new message from Chloe. A photo of the brunch table, everyone's faces bright and smiling, the lilies in soft focus behind us. The caption read family traditions with enough emojis to look effortless. I zoomed in without meaning to. There I was, in the background, slightly blurred, my face half turned toward the window. I looked like I was already leaving. I set the phone face down on the nightstand and lay back, staring at the ceiling. The afternoon light made patterns through the blinds, golden bars that shifted as the sun moved. 2 years since Paul. 2 years since he'd cleaned out our joint savings account, $9,000 we'd built together, gone in a single transfer, and told me I lived in the past, that my thrifting and mending and careful budgeting were holding us back. He'd wanted someone who kept up, who spent without thinking, who didn't flinch at price tags. Someone who understood that image mattered more than substance, that presentation was everything. I'd let him go, started over, rebuilt my life in this small rental with its creaky floors and decent light and rent I could actually afford. For 2 years, I told myself I was doing fine, that I'd moved on, that I'd learned something valuable about who I was and what I wanted. But Chloe's voice kept looping in my head. "If you need anything, just say so." And underneath it, the implication, "You're not okay. You're struggling. You need saving." I got up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. A couple walked by, hand in hand, laughing about something. A kid on a bike rode past, training wheels wobbling. Normal life, happening to people who probably didn't spend their Sunday afternoons dissecting family dynamics and wondering when they'd become the punchline. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Chloe. "Hope you got home safe." XO, I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the hall closet, the one I never opened unless I had to. Inside was a box, white with a silver ribbon, the kind of packaging that screams luxury. Chloe had given it to me last Christmas, at their house during the annual party they threw for Derek's colleagues. She'd pulled me aside, away from the crowd, and pressed it into my hands. "Just some extras," she'd said, waving her hand like it was nothing. "Things I bought and never wore. I thought of you." I'd taken it home, opened it in private. Inside, 2 designer scarves, still wrapped in tissue, probably $200 each. A wool coat with the tags on, creamy white, completely impractical for my life. A pair of leather gloves I'd never wear, too delicate, too expensive looking. All things she'd bought on a whim and decided she didn't want, passed down to me like I was Goodwill with a pulse. I'd never worn any of it. Couldn't bring myself to. It felt like accepting something I didn't want to accept, that I needed saving, that I wasn't enough as I was, that my life was something to be fixed. I carried the box to the kitchen table and sat down, pulling the items out one by one. The scarves were beautiful, I'd give her that. Silk and cashmere blend, hand-printed patterns that probably came from some Italian artisan workshop. The coat was equally stunning, soft as a cloud, the kind of thing you'd wear to a gallery opening or a winter wedding. The gloves matched perfectly, butter-soft leather lined with silk, and I'd never touched any of them. They'd sat in that box for 4 months, gathering dust in my hall closet, taking up space. I picked up one of the scarves, ran my fingers over the fabric. It was objectively gorgeous. But every time I looked at it, all I could see was Chloe's face when she handed me the box, that mixture of generosity and pity, like she was bestowing a blessing on someone less fortunate, like she was Lady Bountiful and I was the grateful peasant. I set it down and reached for my phone, typed clothing donation centers near me into the search bar, and scrolled through the results. St. Benedict's Church had a spring drive happening this week, drop-offs accepted through Friday. Community outreach, the website said, helping families in need. I clicked through the photos, smiling volunteers, racks of clean clothes, people shopping with dignity. Something clicked in my chest, quiet and certain, like a door closing softly. I wasn't angry. That was the strange part. I'd expected to feel furious, vindicated, something sharp and hot that would propel me into action with righteous indignation, but all I felt was tired. Tired of carrying things that weren't mine, of wearing ghosts, of being the person everyone felt sorry for without anyone actually asking what I needed. I stood up, left the box on the table, and walked back to my bedroom. Opened the closet again and really looked at what was in there. My clothes, my choices. Each piece selected with care, worn with intention, maintained with effort. This was my style, my life, my values made visible, and there was nothing wrong with any of it. But in the hall closet, in that white box with its silver ribbon, sat someone else's idea of who I should be. Someone else's cast-offs, reframed as charity, offered with a smile that said, "I'm helping you," when what it really meant was, "I feel sorry for you." I went to the living room and pulled out my laptop, settled onto the couch with a cup of tea. Earl Grey, the cheap kind from the grocery store that I actually preferred to the fancy loose-leaf stuff Chloe served, and opened my email. Scrolled through work messages, client requests, the ordinary machinery of my freelance life. Good clients, decent pay, flexibility to work when and how I wanted. It wasn't Fortune 500, wasn't a corner office with a view, but it was mine. I'd built it from nothing after Paul left, after my credit tanked and my confidence shattered. I'd done that. Not Chloe. Not Derek with his job offers and his casual condescension. Me. I finished my tea, rinsed the mug, another thrift store find, handmade pottery with a glaze that caught the light, and went back to the hall closet. Pulled out the white box and carried it to the kitchen table. Then I kept going. Derek's barber jacket. He'd left it at Thanksgiving, draped over my couch when he'd gotten too warm after dinner. I texted Chloe about it the next day, said I had it, asked when he wanted to pick it up. She'd said, "No rush," and then it had been Christmas and then New Year's, and now it was April and the jacket was still hanging in my coat closet, like it lived there. Avery sneakers. White leather, some designer brand I didn't recognize, probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She'd kicked them off during a sleepover last fall, left them under my coffee table, and I'd texted about those too. "Oh, she has like 3 pairs. Don't worry about it," Chloe had said, as if my apartment were storage, as if my space didn't matter. I gathered them all. The box from Chloe, the jacket, the sneakers, a designer umbrella someone had left in my car, a coffee table book about Tuscan architecture that Derek had lent me 2 years ago and never asked about. All these things that had accumulated in my space, physical reminders that my home was just an extension of theirs, a place where their overflow could live because they had too much and I, apparently, had too little. I folded everything carefully. Not out of anger, but out of habit, because that's how I'd been raised. You treated things with respect even when letting them go, especially when letting them go. The work took longer than I'd expected. By the time I finished, it was early evening, the light going soft and golden outside my windows. I had 2 large shopping bags packed neatly, items folded and stacked with care. I set them by the door and made myself dinner, pasta with olive oil and garlic, nothing fancy, eaten standing at the counter while I scrolled through my phone. More notifications from Instagram. Avery's post had really taken off. 300 likes, comments from people I didn't know, weighing in on my outfit, my choices, my life. One person wrote, "I actually love vintage though, good for her." Another, "There's vintage and then there's looking like you can't afford new clothes. Know the difference?" Someone else, "Why is everyone being mean? She looks fine." Fine. There was that word again. I closed the app, finished my pasta, and washed my single dish. Stood at the sink and looked out at the darkening street, at the lights coming on in windows across the way, at all the private lives happening in parallel, everyone with their own struggles and stories and reasons. Tomorrow, I'd take the bags to St. Benedict's. Tonight, I'd sleep in my own bed, in my own space, surrounded by things that actually belonged to me. And that felt like enough. I woke up early the next morning, the apartment still gray with pre-dawn light. Made coffee in my grandmother's mug, the one with the chip on the handle that fit perfectly against my thumb, stood at the window and watched the neighborhood wake up. Joggers in bright athletic wear, dog walkers with their patient companions, a man in scrubs heading to the early shift at the hospital 2 blocks over. The clarity I'd felt last night hadn't faded. If anything, it had settled deeper, turned into something solid I could stand on. The morning routine felt different today. Showering, dressing, moving through my small space with purpose instead of habit. I chose my clothes with the same care I always did. Jeans I'd hemmed to the perfect length, a sweater I'd found at an estate sale, soft gray wool that had probably belonged to someone's grandmother. My grandmother's scarf again, because I wasn't done with it yet, because it still held meaning that mattered. I loaded the 2 shopping bags into my car just after 8, the street quiet except for birds and distant traffic. The drive to St. Benedict's took 20 minutes through neighborhoods that shifted from residential to commercial and back again, past coffee shops just opening and schools waiting for their first students. I passed the exit to Chloe's neighborhood, her street with its perfect lawns and newer construction, houses that all looked vaguely related like siblings in expensive clothes, and felt something loosen in my shoulders, some knot I hadn't known I was carrying. St. Benedict's sat on a quiet street, red brick and stained glass, the kind of church that had been there for 100 years and would probably be there for 100 more. A hand-painted sign out front advertised the spring drive in cheerful yellow letters. Donations accepted, all welcome, open hearts, open doors. I parked in the small lot beside a minivan and a sedan with a coexist bumper sticker, pulled the 2 shopping bags from my trunk, and stood there for a moment holding them, feeling their weight. The morning air was cool and clean, smelling of cut grass and something blooming I couldn't name. A woman emerged from the church's side entrance, saw me, and waved. I walked toward her, bags in hand, my heart steady and sure. Inside, the church hall smelled like coffee and old hymnals and the particular mustiness of a building that hosts bake sales and AA meetings and everything in between. Folding tables lined one wall, already stacked with donations, clothes on hangers, shoes in pairs, boxes of books and kitchen items and toys. A woman behind the nearest table looked up when I entered, her face creased with smile lines, her gray hair pulled back in a loose bun. She wore a name tag that said June in careful handwriting and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. "Morning," she said, standing, her voice warm and unsurprised, like people showed up with donations every day. Which I supposed they probably did. "Morning, I have some things for the drive." "Wonderful." She came around the table, gestured to an empty space. "You can set them right here. We'll sort and tag everything this afternoon, get it out on the floor tomorrow." I set the bags down carefully, and she glanced at them with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen thousands of donations, who could probably tell quality from junk at a glance. "These'll go fast," she said, nodding. "Spring clothes, good brands. People appreciate nice things." "Good." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Someone should actually use them." June smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes, that suggests a long life of seeing people at their best and worst and choosing to focus on the best. They will. You'd be surprised what people find when they're looking. Sometimes it's not even about the clothes. It's about the chance to choose something for themselves, to shop with dignity. I nodded, understanding more than she probably realized. Do you need a tax receipt? She asked, reaching for a pad of forms. No, thank you, though. Well, we're grateful either way. She tilted her head slightly, studying me with gentle curiosity. Have you volunteered with us before? We could always use an extra pair of hands during the sale days. I haven't, but maybe. When's the next one? Tomorrow, actually, 10 to 4. It's a bit of organized chaos, but it's good chaos. She pulled a flyer from the table and handed it to me. No pressure, but if you're interested, we'd love to have you. I took the flyer, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my pocket. I'll think about it. That's all anyone can ask. I walked back to my car, got in, and sat there for a minute before turning the key. The bags were gone. The weight was gone. Through the windshield, I could see June inside, already sorting through donations, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. In 24 hours, someone would walk into that hall, browse the racks, and find Chloe's designer scarves or Derek's expensive jacket. They'd try them on, check the price tag, whatever nominal amount St. Benedict's charged to keep the lights on, and decide whether it fit, whether it worked, whether it was theirs. And it would be a choice, not a handout. Not charity with conditions, just a choice. I started the car and drove home through morning traffic that was starting to build, past people heading to work and parents dropping kids at school and all the ordinary machinery of a Tuesday. My phone sat silent in the cup holder. No messages from Chloe, no notifications from Avery's social media, nothing demanding my attention or emotional labor. At home, I made more coffee and opened my laptop. Work emails waited, a new client inquiry, a project deadline I needed to hit by Friday. I settled into the rhythm of it, the careful crafting of words, the puzzle of making language do exactly what it needed to do. Noon came and went. I made lunch, leftover pasta, reheated, and ate it at my desk while reading through a client's brand guidelines. Around 2, my phone finally buzzed. Chloe, hey, how are you? Want to grab coffee this week? I stared at the message for a long moment, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. The old me, the me from yesterday, from last week, from the past 2 years, would have said yes immediately. Would have suggested a time and place, would have shown up with a smile and pretended Sunday hadn't happened, would have let her steer the conversation wherever she wanted it to go. I set the phone down without responding and went back to work. Another hour passed. Another message. Everything okay? You seemed quiet at brunch. Then, 10 minutes later, did I say something wrong? I picked up the phone, typed a response, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Finally settled on, everything's fine. Busy week. Talk soon. I hit send before I could second guess it, then put my phone on silent and slipped it into a drawer. The rest of the afternoon passed in focused work, the kind that feels good because you're making something, solving problems, using your brain in ways that matter. By 5, I'd finished 2 projects ahead of schedule, invoiced a client, and responded to a handful of emails. I closed my laptop with the satisfaction of a day well spent, a day that belonged entirely to me. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went through my closet systematically, trying things on, really looking at each piece in the mirror. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. Does this fit? Does it make me feel like myself? Do I actually wear it, or am I keeping it out of guilt or habit or some story I've been telling myself about who I should be? I made a small pile of things that didn't make the cut. Not much. A dress that had never quite fit right. A blazer I'd bought thinking I'd wear it to networking events I never attended. A pair of shoes that hurt my feet. Maybe 10 items total. I bagged them up, set them by the door with a sticky note. Donation, round 2. The rest, the navy blazer, the mended sundress, the leather jacket, my grandmother's scarf, all stayed. Because they were mine. Because they fit. Because when I wore them, I recognized myself in the mirror. I made dinner, a proper dinner this time, chicken and roasted vegetables, a salad with good olive oil, and ate it at my small kitchen table while reading a novel I'd picked up at the library. No phone, no TV, just the quiet sound of my own breathing and pages turning. After, I washed the dishes by hand, dried them, put them away. Small rituals that had started to feel like meditation, like proof that I could take care of myself, that I was enough. Before bed, I pulled the flyer from my pocket and looked at it again. Spring drive sale. Tomorrow, 10. Volunteers. Welcome. June's gentle face floated through my mind, her words about choosing with dignity, about finding what you need when you're really looking. I set the flyer on my nightstand, turned off the light, and fell asleep easier than I had in weeks. I showed up at St. Benedict's at 9:30 the next morning, half an hour before the sale opened, carrying a thermos of coffee and the kind of nervous energy that comes from doing something new without overthinking it. June was already there, directing a small army of volunteers, mostly women in their 50s and 60s, though I spotted a couple of college-age kids in matching church youth group t-shirts. Everyone moved with purpose, straightening racks, checking price tags, arranging shoes by size on folding tables. June spotted me immediately, her face brightening. You came. Figured I'd see what organized chaos looks like. Oh, you're about to find out. She handed me a name tag and a marker. Write your name, stick it on, and I'll give you the tour. Fair warning, it gets wild around 11 when the word spreads. I wrote Marina in careful letters and pressed the tag to my sweater. June walked me through the hall, explaining the system. Clothes organized by type and size, shoes by size alone, household items in the back corner, a checkout table by the door where everything was priced by category. $2 for shirts, $3 for pants, $5 for coats, nothing over $10. The goal wasn't profit, it was access. We get everyone, June said, gesturing broadly. Single moms, college students, people between jobs, new immigrants, folks who just like a good deal. The rule is simple. Treat everyone with respect. No assumptions, no judgment. Got it? Got it. Good. You're on the coat rack. Help people find their size, keep things organized, redirect to checkout when they're ready. Questions? I shook my head, and she squeezed my shoulder before moving on to brief someone else. I took my position by the coat rack, a long metal rod on wheels packed with jackets and sweaters and a few formal blazers. I recognized Derek's barber jacket immediately, hanging between a puffy North Face and a vintage Levi's denim number. The tag said $8, men's L. Someone had already looked at it. The hanger was slightly askew. At 10, June unlocked the doors, and people streamed in. Not a flood, but a steady flow. Mothers with kids in tow, elderly women with rolling carts, a young man in hospital scrubs who looked like he'd just finished a night shift. They moved through the space with the focused efficiency of experienced thrift shoppers, hands flipping through racks, eyes scanning for sizes and styles that worked. A woman about my age approached the coat rack, her toddler balanced on one hip. Do you have anything lightweight, like spring jacket? I pulled out 3 options, including a cream-colored windbreaker that looked barely worn. She tried it on one-armed, the toddler grabbing at her hair, and checked herself in the full-length mirror someone had propped against the wall. It's perfect, she said, smiling. How much? $5. Sold. She draped it over her arm and moved toward the shoe section, the toddler now reaching for a stuffed animal someone had donated. The morning blurred into a rhythm. Help, suggest, reorganize, repeat. A teenage girl found a prom dress buried in the formal wear section and gasped loud enough that her friends came running. An older man methodically worked through the button-downs, checking collars and cuffs with the eye of someone who knew quality. A woman in a business suit, clearly shopping on her lunch break, found a leather tote bag and clutched it like treasure. Around 11:30, I heard a familiar laugh. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. I turned slowly, carefully, and there she was. Chloe, standing by the entrance with Avery, both of them scanning the room with expressions I couldn't quite read. Chloe wore athleisure that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Avery had her phone out naturally, recording something. They hadn't seen me yet. I could have ducked behind the coat rack, found a reason to disappear into the back room where donations were still being sorted. But something kept me rooted there, name tag and all, standing beside Derek's $8 jacket like a sentinel. Chloe spotted me. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, confusion giving way to something sharper. She said something to Avery, who looked up from her phone, found me, and froze. They approached. Of course they did. Marina? Chloe's voice carried across the space, drawing looks from nearby shoppers. What are you doing here? Volunteering? I kept my voice even, pleasant. What are you doing here? Someone... She stopped, reset. Someone told me they saw Derek's jacket here, the barber one, and Avery's sneakers. Her hand gestured vaguely at the shoe section. We came to check. Okay. Okay? She stepped closer, dropping her voice to something meant to be private but still audible to anyone within 10 feet. Marina, did you donate our things? I donated things that were left at my apartment. I straightened a hanger, not meeting her eyes. They'd been there for months. I figured you didn't need them. That's not... You can't just... She pressed her fingers to her temple, that gesture she'd perfected in high school when dealing with unreasonable people. Those were expensive. Derek's jacket alone was over $400. Then he probably should have picked it up. Avery shifted uncomfortably, phone lowered now, eyes darting between us. A few shoppers had slowed their browsing, pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. Chloe's voice went tighter. This is about brunch, isn't it? You're mad about Easter, so you decided to be petty, and I'm not mad. And I realized, saying it, that it was true. I wasn't mad, wasn't hurt, wasn't anything except clear. I'm just done being storage for things you don't want to deal with. My apartment isn't an extension of yours. Oh my God. She actually laughed, sharp and disbelieving. You're unbelievable. This whole wounded martyr thing you've been doing since Paul left, it's exhausting, Marina. We've all tried to help you, and this is how you... I didn't ask for help. The words came out quiet but firm, cutting through her momentum. I asked for respect. There's a difference. June appeared beside me, her presence solid and calm. Is everything all right here? Chloe turned to her, switching to that voice she used with service workers, pleasant, reasonable, with just enough authority to remind everyone who was in charge. My sister donated some of our family's belongings without permission. I'd like to buy them back. If they're out on the floor, they're available for purchase, June said simply. Same price as everything else? Even if they were donated by mistake? We don't really do mistakes. June's smile was kind but unmovable. We do donations. Once something's donated, it belongs to the community. Chloe stared at her, then at me, her jaw working. Avery touched her mother's arm. Mom, can we just go? No. Chloe moved toward the coat rack, scanning until she found the barber jacket. She pulled it off the hanger, checked the tag, and something in her expression cracked. $8. You're selling Derek's $400 jacket for $8? That's what coats cost here, I said. She clutched the jacket to her chest, and for a second she looked exactly like she had when we were kids, and someone had taken her favorite toy, bewildered, betrayed, unable to compute that the world wasn't arranging itself around her needs. Then her face hardened. You know what? Fine. Keep it. Keep all of it. She thrust the jacket back at me. But don't pretend this is about principle or self-respect or whatever you're telling yourself. This is about you being jealous and bitter and unable to move on. The words should have landed, should have cut. But they just hung there in the air between us, losing power with every second I didn't react. If that's what you need to believe, I said quietly. Avery was pulling on Chloe's arm now, urgent and embarrassed. Mom, everyone's looking. Can we please just leave? Chloe let herself be pulled toward the exit, but she turned back at the door, one last attempt. I tried, Marina. I really tried with you. Don't blame me when you end up alone. They left. The door swung shut behind them. The hall was silent for exactly 3 seconds before the normal sounds resumed. Hangers scraping on racks, quiet conversations, a child's laughter from the toy section. June touched my elbow gently. You okay? I realized I was still holding Derek's jacket. I put it back on the rack, smoothed the collar. Yeah, I'm okay. Family's complicated. That's one word for it. She squeezed my arm and moved on to help someone else. I stayed at my post, helping people find coats, reorganizing as the rack emptied and filled and emptied again. Around 1 o'clock, a man in his 50s tried on the barber jacket, checked the pockets, zipped and unzipped it twice. This is real nice, he said. We got 'em quality. It is? $8? $8. He grinned. My lucky day. He wore it to the checkout table, still smiling. I watched him go, feeling something settle into place. Not victory, not vindication, just a quiet sense that things had found their right level, that the jacket belonged to someone who appreciated it more than the man who'd left it on my couch and forgotten it existed. The afternoon stretched on. My feet hurt. My back hurt. But I stayed until 4, until June started ushering out the last shoppers and the volunteers began breaking down tables and consolidating racks. We worked together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from shared effort toward a common goal. "You're a natural," June said as we folded the last tablecloth. "Any chance you'd come back for our summer sale?" "Maybe," I smiled. "Probably." "Good enough for me." She handed me a schedule flyer. "We're here if you need us. For volunteering or for shopping or just for coffee. We've got terrible coffee and no family drama. Solid trade." I laughed, surprised by the sound. That does sound pretty good. Walking to my car, I pulled out my phone for the first time in hours. 17 missed calls from Chloe, 12 texts. I scrolled through them without opening, saw enough in the previews to get the gist. Anger, hurt, accusations, finally a cold, "I think we need some space." I didn't respond, just put the phone back in my pocket and drove home through late afternoon traffic, windows down, spring air tangling my hair. The next few days passed quietly. Work, meals, the ordinary rhythms of a life that was entirely my own. Chloe didn't call again. Avery sent one message, "I'm sorry about what happened." I deleted the video and I responded simply, "Thank you." "I appreciate that." No follow-up, no extended conversation, just acknowledgement and release. I found myself thinking about Derek's jacket at odd moments, the way that man had smiled when he tried it on, how he'd worn it out of the church hall like it was made for him. Maybe it was. Maybe things found their right people eventually if you let them go instead of holding on out of obligation or guilt or some misplaced sense of what you owed. On Thursday evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my old college roommate Lisa, the one who'd checked in after Paul left and then gradually faded when I kept declining invitations. We talked for an hour, catching up, laughing about old memories, making tentative plans to meet for dinner next week. When we hung up, I felt lighter. Not because I'd reconnected with an old friend, though that was nice, but because I'd reached out. Because I'd stopped waiting for my life to look a certain way before I started living it. On Saturday morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and the sound of birds arguing in the tree outside. Made coffee in my grandmother's mug, carried it to the living room, and stood at the window watching the neighborhood come alive. Joggers and dog walkers and a kid learning to ride a bike, training wheels still on, parents jogging beside with encouraging voices. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but the message made the source clear. "Hey Marina, this is June from St. Benedict's. A woman just came in asking about vintage silk scarves, said she was looking for something blue. Made me think of you. Hope you're having a good weekend." I smiled, saved her number, and typed back, "I am. Thank you for checking in." Her response came immediately. "Coffee this week?" My treat. "Fair warning, it really is terrible coffee." "Sounds perfect," I wrote. "Wednesday. It's a date." I set down my phone and finished my coffee, looking around my small apartment. Everything here was intentional. The thrifted furniture I'd reupholstered myself. The prints on the walls from local artists I discovered at street fairs. The books stacked on every available surface, spines creased from reading and rereading. The clothes in my closet, each piece with its story, its history, its reason for being here. This was my life. Not the before photo in someone else's transformation narrative. Not the charity case waiting to be saved. Just mine. Imperfect and intentional and entirely sufficient. I thought about Chloe, about the way she'd looked at me in the church hall, that mixture of confusion and anger and something that might have been grief. We'd been close once, before money and marriage and diverging values had pulled us onto different paths. Maybe we'd find our way back to something resembling sisterhood eventually. Maybe we wouldn't. Either way, I couldn't keep contorting myself to fit into her idea of who I should be. That afternoon, I did something I'd been putting off for months. I went through my grandmother's things, the box I'd inherited when she died, the one I'd been too sentimental to fully unpack. Photo albums, letters, her sewing kit with its mismatched buttons and careful repairs. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, I found another scarf. Deep emerald silk with gold embroidery, more formal than the blue one I'd been wearing. A note was tucked inside, written in her spidery hand. "For Marina, when she's ready to stop hiding." I held it for a long time, trying to remember when she'd written this, what conversation we'd had that prompted it, but the specific moment didn't matter. The message was clear enough. I folded the scarf carefully and put it in my closet, hanging it where I could see it. Not to wear yet. I wasn't sure when or where I'd need something that formal, but to know it was there, waiting. That evening, I accepted an invitation I'd been declining for weeks. Drinks with Sarah, a friend from college I'd lost touch with after Paul, after everything fell apart and I'd retreated into myself. We met at a wine bar downtown, nothing fancy, and fell into conversation like no time had passed. "You look different," she said, halfway through her second glass. "Good different. More, I don't know, present? I feel more present." I swirled my wine, watching the light through it. "I think I've been performing for a long time, trying to prove I was okay, that I'd recovered, that I was just as put together as everyone else. It's exhausting." "So what changed?" I thought about Easter brunch, about Chloe's gift bags and Derek's casual cruelty and Avery's phone always filming, about standing in that church hall with June, watching strangers find things they needed, make choices with dignity, about driving home afterward feeling lighter than I had in years. "I stopped auditioning for a part I don't want," I said finally. Sarah raised her glass. "I'll drink to that." We stayed until closing, making plans to meet again next week, exchanging numbers and promises we'd actually keep this time. Walking to my car, I passed a boutique window full of sale signs. 50% off. Everything must go. Last chance. I kept walking. Not because I couldn't afford it, not because I was making some statement about consumerism, but because I simply didn't need anything they were selling. Wednesday came. I met June at a cafe near the church, a hole-in-the-wall place with mismatched chairs and coffee that was, as advertised, pretty terrible. We sat by the window, watching people pass, and talked about everything and nothing. Her 30 years of teaching before retirement, her late husband who'd loved terrible puns, her 2 daughters who called every Sunday without fail. "What about you?" she asked. "What's your story?" I gave her the abbreviated version. The breakup, the rebuilding, the slow work of figuring out who I was when I wasn't half of a couple, or the struggling younger sister, or the person everyone felt sorry for. "And your sister?" June asked gently. "Have you talked?" "No, I think we need the space." I stirred my coffee unnecessarily. We've been operating on this dynamic where she's the successful one and I'm the mess she has to manage. I don't want to be managed anymore. "That's fair." June was quiet for a moment then. "You know what I've learned doing this work for 20 years? People think charity is about giving things. It's not. It's about recognizing dignity. The best gift you can give someone is the chance to choose for themselves." "Is that what you think I did? With the donations?" "I think you chose yourself. That's not selfish. That's necessary." We finished our terrible coffee and made plans to meet again, a standing Wednesday morning date if our schedules allowed. Walking back to my car, I felt the sun warm on my face, my grandmother's blue scarf light at my throat, and realized I wasn't waiting for anything to change anymore. Wasn't waiting for Chloe to understand, or for Paul to regret leaving, or for some future version of myself to arrive with perfect clothes and a perfect life and proof that I'd made it. This was it. This, right now, was making it. 2 weeks later, my phone rang early on a Sunday morning. "Chloe." I stared at her name on the screen considering, then answered. "Hey. Hey." Her voice was careful, stripped of its usual certainty. "I've been thinking about what you said. At the church." I waited. "I talked to Derek about Easter, about how we treated you." A pause. "I didn't realize how it sounded. The comments about your clothes, the gifts for everyone else, offering to help with money you don't need. It was condescending. I'm sorry." "Thank you." "I don't know if we can fix this," she continued. "I don't know if you even want to, but I miss you. I miss my sister. Not the version I was trying to turn you into. Just you." I pulled my grandmother's scarf tighter, feeling the silk against my fingers. "I miss you too, but things have to be different." "I know." "I mean it, Chloe. I'm not going to keep showing up to be your project. If we do this, we do it as equals. My choices are mine, even if you don't understand them." "Okay." She sounded smaller than I'd ever heard her. "Can we try? Coffee sometime? Just us?" "Not coffee." I looked around my small apartment at the life I'd built with such care. "But you could come here. See where I live. Maybe help me hang some shelves I've been meaning to install." She laughed, surprised. "You want me to do manual labor?" "I want you to see my life. The real one. Not the version you've been imagining? Okay, she said again. When? We made plans for the following Saturday. After we hung up, I sat with my coffee and watched the morning light pattern across my walls. Maybe it would work, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe Chloe would come over and make comments about my furniture or offer unsolicited decorating advice. Maybe we'd fight again. Maybe we'd find our way to something real. But that was future Marina's problem. Present Marina had shelves to buy, work to finish, a volunteer shift at St. Benedict's on Friday afternoon. Present Marina had a life that fit, that felt right, that didn't require apology or explanation. The week passed in a blur of productivity. I finished 3 client projects, invoiced promptly, and even picked up a new contract with a startup that appreciated my straightforward approach to copy. On Friday, I showed up at St. Benedict's for my volunteer shift, and June greeted me like an old friend, handing me a name tag without prompting. "Shoe section today," she said. "It's chaos, but you'll manage." She was right. The shoe section was organized chaos. People trying on mismatched pairs, kids pulling laces, a teenage boy looking for something specific for a job interview. I helped him find a pair of black dress shoes that fit, barely worn, and watched his face transform when he looked in the mirror. "These are perfect," he said. "How much?" $4. "Serious?" He checked the soles, the stitching, like he couldn't believe his luck. "Man, thank you." "You're welcome. Good luck with the interview." He left wearing the shoes, his old sneakers in a bag, and I felt that same quiet satisfaction I'd felt watching the man in Derek's jacket. Things finding their right people. Choices made with dignity. After my shift, June pulled me aside. "There's a volunteer appreciation dinner next month. Nothing fancy, just pizza and stories. You should come." "I'd like that." "Good." She squeezed my hand. "You fit here, Marina, in case nobody's told you that in a while." I drove home with those words echoing in my head. You fit here. Not because I'd changed or performed or proven anything, just because I'd shown up as myself. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that makes you believe in fresh starts. I'd bought the shelves earlier in the week, simple wooden ones from a home improvement store, nothing fancy but solid. I laid them out in my living room with the brackets and screws, waiting for Chloe. She arrived at 10, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt I'd never seen her wear, her hair in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry except her wedding ring. She looked younger, more like the sister I remembered. "Hi," she said from the doorway, uncertain. "Hi, come in." She stepped inside slowly, looking around with what seemed like genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Her eyes moved over my thrifted furniture, my library of secondhand books, the art on my walls. "It's nice," she said finally. "It's very you." "Thanks." I gestured to the shelves. "Ready to build?" We worked together for 2 hours, following instructions, measuring twice, drilling carefully. The conversation stayed light at first. Weather, Avery's upcoming exams, a movie Chloe had seen. But gradually as we worked, something shifted. "I've been thinking a lot," Chloe said, holding a bracket in place while I drilled. "About why I acted that way. At brunch and before." I paused, drill in hand. "And?" "I think I was scared. After Derek's company sold, everything changed so fast. New house, new friends, new everything. And you stayed the same. You stayed you." She looked at me. "I think part of me resented that you didn't need what I had to be happy." "I wasn't always happy." "I know, but you were real. And I think I forgot how to be that." We finished installing the bracket in silence, then moved to the next one. The rhythm of working together felt familiar, like when we were kids building blanket forts or helping our mom with yard work. "I'm going to screw up again," Chloe said eventually. "I'm going to say the wrong thing or offer help you don't need. But I want to try, if you'll let me." I looked at her, my sister, flawed and human and trying. "I want to try too." We finished the shelves as afternoon sun filled the apartment. They weren't perfect. One was slightly crooked, another wobbled until we added an extra screw, but they were ours. Built together, a beginning. After Chloe left, promising to text during the week, I started filling the shelves with books. Arranged them not by author or genre, but by feel, by which ones wanted to live next to each other. At the end, I placed my grandmother's mug on the top shelf, the one with the chip where I could see it. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug. My grandmother's mug, the one with the chip that fit perfectly against my thumb. Set it in the dish rack to dry. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with Sunday morning sounds: church bells, children's laughter, someone practicing scales on a piano. I walked to my closet and opened it, looking at the emerald scarf still hanging there. For Marina, when she's ready to stop hiding. I lifted it down, ran my fingers over the silk and gold embroidery, and draped it around my neck. It looked ridiculous with my weekend clothes, sweatpants and an old t-shirt, nothing fancy. But standing there in my small bedroom with sunlight streaming through the window, I felt exactly like myself. Cloth holds memory, my grandmother had said, but I got to choose which ones to carry. I adjusted the scarf, let it settle light and easy around my shoulders, and went to make breakfast in my small kitchen where everything, every mug, every plate, every worn wooden spoon, had been chosen with intention. Where nothing was borrowed, nothing was charity, nothing required explanation. Just mine. Entirely, beautifully, sufficiently mine.